Hello, this is Khaled Alawadi from Khalifa University. Uh, my background is like in urban design and urban planning, particularly sustainable urbanism, and I'm the founder of the Sustainable Critical Infrastructure program at Khalifa University. My research is like uh, focuses on the intersection between urban form and sustainability, and also tracing the evolution of cities through time. I would like to thank the organizers and the scientific committee for inviting me to this great event, mega events, and the city. And today, particularly, I'm going to talk about Dubai's urban and regional development and the Expo 2020 project. First, the presentation will start with the evolution of Dubai's urbanism and where does Expo 2020 fits exactly through that evolution. So if we think about the UAE, it's like often like it's noted for its grandiose approach to urbanism, and it's replete with examples of impressive monuments and very big architecture. Since the late 1980s and early 1990s, planners and urban designers in the region have forgotten that cities are designed first and foremost for people. So no systematic approach and ideology acknowledge the human scale or value socially sensitive practices. Instead, urban design has been mainly considered as an architectural outgrowth or as big architecture. So this embrace of bigness in architecture and development resulted in overscaling the built environment to meet particular motifs that are like related to economic and commodification. So as Michael Sorkin has argued, like urban design in the region or urban design practice seemed to reach a dead end. It reached its full capacity and then withered, unable to provide any theoretical pathways for practice. Sorkin's criticism of the narrowness and ineffectiveness of the discipline of urban design applies to the UAE's modern and postmodern urban design practice. I would argue that development typologies are now redundant. They are carbon copies of one another. They are very limited to mega scale urbanism and big projects, and they completely fail to acknowledge the human scale. So once urban design was modest, was rich with visual variety, diversity, and it acknowledged the human scale and human needs. Urban design practice became unfortunately rigid, limiting, monotonous, mostly privatized, and unresponsive to the human scale. So the architectural feats required to raise all of these gleaming skyscrapers and skylines, and for they were important for global branding and economic diversification. But there are many other, I would say, facets of urban design in the region also warrant recognition. One example is the human scale landscape that disappeared since the 1980s. And this landscape promotes everydayness, promotes pedestrian-driven places. However, modern and postmodern development approaches embraced bigness and embraced economic development over the human scale. Uh, if we look into the evolution of Dubai, three different, I would say, elements changed through that evolution. We have the architecture and urban form. Then we have the network system, the streets, configurations, and the alleyways, and also what changed also people and their interaction with the built environment. So not only urban form changed, but also human behavior and their interaction with the built environment also changed. If we look into whatever happened to UAE's urbanism, the evolution of urban form with a particular focus on Dubai, I mean, we can look into this diagram which shows the growth of Dubai from 1973 to 2011 From a compact urban form in the 70s, then we have the period of suburban growth, like in the 80s, then we have suburban growth plus urban globalization or bigness, and massive signs of, I would say, bigness and globalization after 2000. The same happened to the city of Abu Dhabi, from a very compact urban form to a massive urban agglomeration that extends in the desert landscape and also in the Gulf Shore. This diagram is like side by side that shows Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and the older landscapes are very dense and they are showed in very like solid red dots, while the other like faded red dots are like the suburban, I would say, communities. This is like also a side by side at two different typologies of like very early 50s and late 60s of Abu Dhabi and Dubai, two different, completely two different, I would say, urban forms. One is like very compact and organic, I would say, and the other one is well structured and well planned. So the two cities followed a very different ideology in city design, as we see here also. One like based on the grid system, and it's from its early inception, and the other very, very organic. So it's like planned growth versus organic growth. So actually, the evolution of Dubai is divided into like, I would say, three different or four different phases, and we will see how the Expo 2020 fits within that. We have the human scale, then we have dispersion, suburban growth, then we have bigness, and then we have beyond bigness. And that's like the period between 2007 and 2013 before the Expo appeared. So the human scale, like urban form, like in the 70s, this period stretches from the late 60s until like the late 70s. Urban form was like rich with visual variety, density, very interconnected street systems. Urbanism featured a human scale, a diverse system of land uses, high density, higher permeability, compact urban forms that made easy for people to get around and to reach most of their destinations. Unlike the landscape of bigness, where regulations and formalities usually control human movement, everyday urbanism, like in these human scale, or I would say the built environment of the late 60s and 70s, is an outcome of a natural instinct and desire that did not necessarily follow any formal programs or rules. And these examples shows like informality in everyday life, spontaneity, and these exceptions also to the order of formals are not signs of blight or disorder, but they are signs of, I would say, everydayness, and they are natural parts of the city, and urban designers and planners should really know how to deal with it. So human scale landscapes provide a clear lesson about what it really takes to create socially sensitive practices outside the confines and boundaries of bigness. This is just one example of a human scale landscape of Dubai. This is like beyond bigness. Another example, like you can see bigness in the background. This is like this interesting juxtaposition between a traditional neighborhood and Dubai's new skyline that emerged in the early 90s. People in these places like walk shoulder to shoulder. There is a close proximity between people and people and people and places as well. And also people claim lands for their particular cultural expressions and programs in terms of landscaping, cultural activities, events, socializing between neighbors, claiming the alleyways for different uses, and so on. They are also environmentally friendly. As we see here, like the relationship between one building to another building provides shade. So there is this kind of self-shading criteria, as we see also in this picture. Also, kids like claim spaces as playgrounds, alleyways gets like interesting landscape elements, life between buildings, interesting, I would say, uh, channel through an interesting architecture. And it's like these diagrams shows also side by side is just one typical element of the human scale landscape, which are the alleyways, and they are like very massive in terms of their presence and existence and the old fabric of Abu Dhabi and Dubai. They are very critical and they are really massive. In just this diagram, we have like almost 7,800 alleyways, which is equivalent to 252 kilometers. And this area is around 10 by 10 kilometers. So almost 8,000 alleyways. And this is a collage that shows the everydayness in these alleyways and how these places shape people's behavior. So after the human scale or the compact development, we witnessed something called dispersion or planned suburban growth in the late 80s and early 1990s. The compact urban form and the dense urban fabrics were swamped by unstoppable growth of big suburbs. Segregated low density developments were booming around the region, and urban development shifted towards isolated, fragmented, single-use buildings, often surrounded by freeways and great separated interchanges and also large open spaces that segregated people from one another and from the public realm and their daily needs. Here, this diagrams is like an interesting diagram that shows the human scale on the upper line, and we have dispersion the lower diagrams. We can see the it's a comparative like diagram or figure ground between the two, I mean dispersion and human scale. So since the late 1980s, we can see from the diagram, the land use system and the configuration of the built environment have completely changed. Consolidated density blocks were replaced by super blocks. The buildings that once occupied the land parcels, they were like moved to bigger parcels behind concrete fenced walls. Then the mixed use developments were swapped by single uses, and the interconnected streets were swapped with looping, curving, and cul-de-sacs. So the public realm lost its social content and was eradicated by sprawling suburban communities. And much of these, like suburban developments, were not sympathetic to context and the preservation of historic urban design elements and ideals. This is a diagram also that shows the transformation at the plot level. Once the 1 acre of land housed maybe 12 units or 12 buildings, now the 1 acre houses maybe 3 to 2 units per acre. And this is a closer diagram that shows like a 1 acre that could house, like in the human scale, housed around 12 to 16 units per acre with mixed uses also. But in the dispersion, they housed maybe once like sometimes 4 units per acre, sometimes 6 units per acre, and other times 2 and even maybe 1 units per acre. So this diagram shows dispersion, and many argue that our region is like characterized by splintering urbanism, a disconnect between physicality and humanity. And this morphology, according to Graham and Marvin, is like a form of geographic distancing and biased infrastructure development. This is like an infinite, like a picture that shows infinite suburbs in Dubai, and this is like the growth of the suburban growth is a common reality. It's unstoppable. And the UAE and the Gulf region are not the only regions suffering from sprawl. The demise of everyday social encounters in low density suburbs is a widely debated topic. as a lot of scholars at MIT Center for Advanced Urbanism have argued, and they said like global urbanization is heading towards infinite suburbia, and this dispersion is the common reality more or less for almost all large cities in the world. So this is an interesting diagram that shows Dubai. It's like an urban network analysis diagram, and it shows like the red like dots shows the human scale landscape, while the blue ones shows suburbs. And like the human scale landscape, where you can see the hotspots, the red to the orange, people can reach using the existing network from 500 to 1,750 buildings, while in the blue dots, the cooler colors, people can reach maybe between 10 to 200 buildings. So there is a disconnection happen between people and buildings and people and people. The same for Abu Dhabi, the older areas and the older, I would say, built environment of the 70s, people can reach up to maybe 1,200 buildings, but in the suburbs, people can reach only maybe same thing, around the same thing, like 0 to 200 buildings. So this talk or this research does not reject suburban development, but rather than like condemning suburbia or trying to end its existence, it provides maybe a route to improve them or to rethink urbanism in the UAE. So design and planning practice in the UAE, I would say, need an overhaul, including an improved ideology of urban design. And this research provides some insights to think about that. So we had that, we talked about the human scale, then we talked about dispersion, then we have the third phase of Dubai's evolution as bigness. In 2000, planning began to focus on neoliberalism. Planners enhanced the role of private sector in city design and development. This model of urbanism embraces economic tolerance and bigness, including mega projects and spectacular architecture on massive scale, all of which are overscaled and massively privatized. And the first approach to bigness in Dubai was building a new contemporary downtown area, a stretch of, I would say, high rises along this highway that goes all the way from Abu Dhabi to Dubai. So that was the start, and it started in 1990s. Bigness, defined usually as large-scale architecture and big plan development, is the urban model that has come to dominate our cities, privatizing urban life and large swath of urban space. And usually big projects and big architecture tend to ignore their environment. They are autonomous, separate from the surrounding fabric, and they are all inward oriented, rejecting the city instead of merging into its dynamic system and into its various urban fabrics. So the new partnership between the government and the private sector in Dubai overscaled bigness and facilitated the emergence of a public realm and architecture and mega development that are very exclusive and privatized. Here we can see like a map of Dubai, and we can see the free zones where I would say the public-private companies control, and they control around 46% of Dubai's land, and all of these lands are being developed as mega projects, as gated communities, as tower complexes, offshore projects, and so on. And they are all geared towards the high income group. And the majority of these are being developed as gated communities and high rises. This collage puts together the three different phases of Dubai's urban evolution. We have up, all the way up, compact development or the human scale. Then we have at the center suburban growth there all the way Down we have bigness with the gated communities, tower complexes, and offshore projects. I would argue that the UAE's current planning practice guarantee that bigness will continue. Bigness is unstoppable, it's inevitable. Recently, or maybe a few years ago, Dubai has begun constructing the Santiago Calatrava Tower, which will surpass Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. And also, of course, we have the Expo 2020, which also confirms this approach of bigness and global branding and economic development. So the old frontier of human scale urbanism has been abolished. Big architecture and mega plan developments have swapped the human scale and local flavor. So saying that bigness will continue, we have the Expo 2020, which is an evidence that bigness will continue in the UAE. And Dubai won the bid to host the Expo 2020 in 2013. That was the plan for it. And usually mega events used to be called the hallmark event, whose distinctive traits lie in their limited duration and in their primary development aimed at enhancing awareness, appeal, and profitability, of course, of the hosting area in a short or long term in the legacy period, of course. According to some scholars, the term mega event describes large events of world importance and high profile, which have a major impact on the image of the host city. And mega events are like their examples are like the World Expos, like the Expo 2020, the Olympic Games, the World Cups, the Asian Games, and so on. And throughout history, World Expos have unveiled iconic buildings such as the Eiffel Tower, the Seattle Space Needle, and so on. So why to host a mega event? I mean, there are different, I would say, reasons for that. It's I would say events contribute to increasing the destination's attractiveness, but they act primarily as a key marketing propositions in the promotion of the place itself. So there is about city branding, there is about infrastructure development, there is about development of tourism. So it has this kind of long-term positive consequences in terms of tourism, in terms of business, in terms of investments. And it also, for the UAE, it reinforces its reputation as a premier location for commerce and trend. Then we have it's a catalyst also for infrastructure development. It's also development of tourism. Then there are also, of course, some criticism about hosting a mega event. It's case studies have shown that hosting a mega event has also led to a soaring local debt that undermines the local, I would say, term interest in terms of economic sustainability and social stability as well. Just as an example, the Beijing Olympics 2008, only the construction of the main stadium brought about a huge debt that will take almost 3 decades to pay off. So mega events are extremely costly and resource intensive projects, and mega events must also be integrated into a broader development planning process, and therefore they are beneficial for the hosting area only if they represent a single element in the tourism development program in order to pay back all of these debts. So many argue that mega events also require a participatory planning process because of its nature and its impact on the city, not only on the built structure, but also on people. So it consumes a significant amount of public resources to build infrastructure, modifying the built environment. It leads to an international exposure and media scrutiny. By hosting large number of tourists, it generates a possible cultural contamination that is linked to the significant opening up of the area towards tourists and visitors. And also mega events are expected to generate economic externalities such as the development of companies and organizations that directly or indirectly serve the mega event, and also non-economic impacts in the form of cultural legacies, variations to tourism culture, and to the community's national and international perceptions. If we talk about Dubai 20, like Expo 2020, so it won it was originally supposed to be in October 2020, but due to the COVID-19 pandemic, it has been postponed to October 2021. Historically, Dubai was called Al-Wasl, which translates to the connection, since it linked people from all over the region. That heritage will be the forefront of the Expo 2020. It's the motto. So it aims to connect more than 180 nations and to catch up an international audience of 25 million visitors, 70 of which are expected from abroad. 25 million corresponds to more visitors than the combined number of tickets sold for the FIFA 2010 World Cup in South Africa, the London 2012 Summer Olympics, as well as the 2014 FIFA World Cup in Brazil, and also the 2016 Summer Olympics in Rio. So the site of the Expo is 4.38 square kilometers. Approximately 2 square kilometers will form the Expo gated area, while the remaining will feature supporting amenities like the parking, the village for the participants, and staff accommodation, logistics, warehousing, and so on. So the site of the Expo is within Dubai South District, east of Jebel Ali Free Zone extension and south of Dubai Investment Park. Some more facts about the Expo site. The site or the theme or the Expo site is based on 3 different themes, which is opportunity, mobility, and sustainability. So we have 3 pavilions, like the opportunity pavilion, the mobility pavilion, and the sustainability pavilion. And there is different platforms to raise awareness, with 9 thematic weeks dedicated to climate, urban development in cities, travel and exploration, health, innovation, agriculture, women, water, energy, and so on. So the organizers are expecting on an average 150,000 visitors on an average per day. And the site capacity is around 300,000 people per day, which is thrice the capacity of Wembley Stadium in London. Approximately 39,000 organizations from more than 150 countries have registered to do business at the Expo. It will host the largest 360 projection service. The site will also host more than 60 live events per day for the duration of 6 months, and a lot of national and international celebrations like the UAE National Day, Christmas, Diwali, New Year's Eve, Chinese New Year, International Women's Day. And it said 85% of the all waste will be recycled, and there is also, it has an energy consumption strategies through using renewables. So this is a picture of the 360 Expo Dome and projection. This is the site under construction with the dome. And it's the economics of the Dubai's Expo 2020, if we talk about it. The Middle East commercial hub has gone through very tough years recently, as oil revenue dropped, with property prices down about 1/3 since 2014. And also the all-important tourism industry struggling also to grow. In 2018, the economy expanded only 1.9%, its weakest pace in almost a decade. So the economic impact of the Expo extends beyond the actual Expo period. The legacy period is expected to be driven by the development activity and the effects of the expansion of Dubai South Township rather than trading activity from the UAE Expo attendees. So the gross value added from the legacy period is estimated to be almost $16.9 billion. There is another projection published last year. It's like the UAE economy will see like a 33.4 billion boost between 2013 and 2031 because of the Expo, alongside of like $10.9 billion of investments made in infrastructure over the Expo period. So total expenditure was expected to reach $18.1 billion in 2020, up like 17% from all of that, from like 56.8 billion dirhams this year, according to figures released by the government's media office. So a forecast made last year by Dubai-based Arqam Capital predicted an economic benefit from up to $9 billion in tourist spending in the city. So, and also another estimate of 2 billion or around 44.5 million dollars will be generated in total by food and beverage sales only. Total expenditure of like 8 billion has been invested in only the infrastructure of the Expo. The event will boost the local economy and support an equivalent of like provides around 50,000 full-time jobs. However, according to Export Analytica Middle East, the economic boost has already happened with regards to construction and towards the property market. There are likely to be some trade deals closed because of the event, but it is unlikely to be a game changer for the city. So one risk for Dubai is of overbuilding for the Expo 2020, which could have a knockoff effect for the Emirates government related entities and their ability to repay the large amount of debts they own. Capital Economics says those debts are about $60 billion, equal to 50% of Dubai's GDP. So impact on real estate market. Dubai's real estate market has slowed in the wake of drop in oil prices that began in 2014, as well as ongoing concerns about the oversupply of properties in the market. So the Expo 2020 is unlikely to improve the dire conditions of Dubai's real estate market, as many studies and economic reports have shown. However, some other reports suggest that Dubai's property market could bounce back strongly in 2021 on the back of increased economic activity related to the Expo 2020. So there was a survey made by some researchers about the impact of Expo or whether the residents see the Expo as a positive event or negative. Respondents from the survey-based research study of a sample of 316 residents, like UAE nationals and expatriates of the city of Dubai, exhibited like a positive opinion about the Dubai Expo 2020. While they are generally highly supportive to the event, they are less convinced that the positive impacts will outweigh the negative ones. So this diagram shows the Expo site. The Expo site is a very small portion of the Dubai South development. It's just a small portion, and at the placed at the intersection or the great separated interchanges. This is like the site like a couple of years ago. This is the construction, and this is the Expo site now. It's just part of Dubai South development, a very small portion of Dubai South development. So here we can see the Expo 2020, like the growth of the site, like from here. This is the site here, and these are like MR South and Dubai Expo project. We have at the center of Dubai South, Al Maktoum Airport, the second airport in Dubai. Then we have the Expo here. Then all of these projects will be like a lot of housing, mega development projects. This is a closer look like about the evolution of the Expo site. So 2010, like nothing in the site. 2013, 15, construction, like here we can see some signs of the construction in 2017, 2019, and present. So the site is almost have been like shaped. And here we can see in the southern part, like we have some like emerging developments coming also. So this is the site also, like a closer look to the site, and the airport is a bit clear here. Here it's I would say a closer look. So that's the Expo. Here is like the a very massive empty land dedicated for housing projects. Then we have the Bayward Central or Al Maktoum Airport. And then we have Dubai Industrial City and logistics and warehouse districts related to the Jebel Ali free zone. These are some images of the Expo like dome. And previously, like present projects in the Expo site, we have Dubai Investment Park, Green Community, and all of these projects like have been there in the site before the announcement of Expo 2020. Then we have the Dubai South project. It's like a big master plan project. The total area of that is around 145 square kilometers, and Expo is only around 4.5 kilometers. So it's very small portion of the Dubai South project. And Dubai South project is expected to create around 500,000 jobs, and all of these like most of the projects in this site is just they are redundant, like very much similar to the other gated communities and tower complexes in the city. So this is like a diagram that shows Al Maktoum International Airport, the residential gated community, the exhibition district, the Expo 2020. Then you have the Golf District, the logistics district, and so on, like in the Dubai South. And all of these, like a lot of projects, the Pulse, the Mag 5 Boulevard, all of these are like townhouses, serviced apartments, hotels, shopping malls, served by golf courses, massive landscapes, and they are highly like privatized. They are very like carbon copies of other gated communities in Dubai. So the entire like Dubai South itself, it's not unique in terms of its development. It's just very similar to any other kind of development in the city in terms once it comes to its, I would say, housing fabric. So here, like other projects like Parkland Residence, Parkland Townhouses, the villages, Dubai Investment Parks, and so on, like all of these are similar projects. Even you can tell from the renderings that are very similar to other projects. So MR South is another gated community within like Dubai South, still like similar, like same theme, gated communities with townhouses and villas. This is like just one example, like renderings of all of these like high-end projects. And this is just one master plan in the vicinity of Expo. This is like under construction, coming up different housing projects. So in terms of urban form, in terms the built structure of Dubai South that hosts the Expo 2020, its built fabric is very similar to any other part in Dubai that are characterized by bigness. The developments are themed, they are privatized, the density is very low, the street systems are curvy, looping, disconnected, interconnected, disconnected, and developments they were planned as they are in private islands. There is no integration between them in the Dubai South, so they are fragmented. Everyone works by its own without connection with the other development. The good thing about the Expo site is the expansion of the Dubai's metro. So Dubai Metro started the expansion process. The new line, Expo 2020 line, it's 15 kilometers, 7 stations, including 2 undergrounds. It starts from the Nakhil Harbor and extends all the way to the Expo site and also to the Al Maktoum Airport. So it has a potential also to connect the 2 airports of Dubai. It will also pass through different housing districts like Dubai Investment Park, Discovery Gardens, and Forjan, and other developments. So residents in the suburbs will benefit greatly due to the expansion project, and real estate demand has a highly risen, like in some communities along this new line of the Expo 2020. So this is the Dubai map, the existing green line, the existing red line, and then here we have the blue line for that connects the red line to Dubai Expo site and to Al Maktoum International Airport. So it connects all the way the Expo and the airport also to the other airport in the city. And this is like before construction of the line, and here we can see the extension of the line, and the line is almost completed now, and it passes through this one development that is very like dense. So we talked about the evolution of Dubai and its 3 different phases, like the human scale, the dispersion, suburban growth, then we had bigness and the Expo 2020. But there is like an interesting, like I would say, period of Dubai urban growth that is not really well documented in the literature, which I call it before bigness continues. And this period is between like 2007 to 2014, when it's like between the economic crisis and the time that Dubai won the bid to Expo 2020. So I call it like beyond bigness, the quotidian landscape. While bigness has outshined like in early 2000 and dwarfed the human scale landscape, urban scholars and architects have admired and advocated the old ideals of urban design. So during since 2008, something new emerged in the city of Dubai, which is called the demolish rebuild era. And this time, like between 2008 and before the Expo, the city started to look into the traditional neighborhoods located in the central cities to swap them with high-end projects. So gentrification happened mostly for the first time in Dubai at very big scale. Due to the economic crisis, Dubai stopped building on vacant lands, and in this period it started to demolish the traditional neighborhoods and swap it with high-end projects. That was like between 2008 and 2013. Then when the Dubai won the Expo, development typologies began again to occupy vacant lands or under or unoccupied lands. So human scale, like urbanism, like, and these neighborhoods, this is like one example of the neighborhood that were, I would say, demolished and during the economic crisis. These places are very rich in terms of, I would say, social consistency, social interaction, a strong attachment between people and people, between people and places. People like, it's very rich in terms of everydayness. Also, people claim a lot of public land for their daily practices, activities. For example, we can see these two gentlemen here where sitting on a bench next to their farm, or what they call it their farm. Alleyways get cleaned for landscaping, raising chicken and rooster. Rooftops gets cleaned for raising vegetables. Life like between alleyways, this gentleman is standing next to his farm too. So these areas are rich of human animation. People get together and their desire is fulfilled by, I would say, meeting each other and on daily basis. So this is something that you cannot find in this simplicity in life. This everydayness is something that you cannot find in, I would say, the landscape of bigness. Here we can see also additions and extension to the houses, extending the living area into the the right of way. Here, like seniors sitting, kids walking to a grocery store, kids cleaning the alleys for their daily, I would say, activities. Here we can see this gentleman also. He has like an extended outdoor living room, and it's a place that people meet with each other and take care of each other. That's beyond bigness, and these like are very rich communities and the city that do not exist anymore. Most of these places, or all of them, have been demolished to give away for bigness. Here we can see like even the not only the kids but also the adults like get together. This is just one corner claimed as a prayer area. So it's like people like feel they own the public realm or they own the right of way, not because they have the property title, but because they have control over the land. The land is adaptable to meet their needs. So during the day and during the night, the streets are full of people. People walk shoulder to shoulder, regardless of age, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of nationality. Everyone is equal in these places. So people create in these places their own residents create their own informal rules and cultural codes to control and manage the built environment. The precise number and size of human scale urban areas in Dubai or in the UAE is very difficult to estimate, but the lesson here is not about their size or about their number, but it's the lessons they teach us in terms of urbanism. Looking into individual stories, this is just one family in one neighborhood. They built this interesting, I would say, concrete platform, which is an open living area to the sky, and people of the community, anyone is welcome from the community to sit here and socialize with a neighbor. And this is like an every afternoon practice. Another story, this gentleman also came to this neighborhood like in the early 70s. He lived there for 30 years. He came with like his family now. They are like 15 members. They live 3 generations or 4 generations of household in just one house. And he has a very interesting quotation. He said, "We all know each other," when we interviewed him, and we know lots of things about each other as well. He like enjoys planting and honey harvesting in his backyard. This is him like during every afternoon. He invites friends also for an afternoon tea in his farm. Uh, he says, I spend most of my day in the backyard doing things to keep myself busy until the sunset. And the visitors come to him without any invitation. They just stop by and chat every afternoon. So what is really, I would say, happening, a lot of these spaces do not exist anymore. There is a loss of the human scale fabric. This is just one neighborhood. It's called the Satwa in 2008. This is like beyond Bigness, a traditional neighborhood just maybe 200, 300 feet away from Bigness. This is the figure or the footprints in 2008. We can see here what happened in 2015. Most of the buildings were demolished. And here we can see the figure ground of 2008 and 2015. Here we can see a detailed morphological mapping of the area between 2008 and 15. Here we can see the footprints, the difference between the footprints. And this is now like most of these are gone of the neighborhoods. And here we can see the fence that puts a line between few like left traditional houses and the line of Bigness. So these are few surviving buildings, and the Bigness is rising in the background. And here we can see the rise of Bigness in the background here. This is like in one of the communities, the last day before people like move out. Here we can see this gentleman like next to his farm, and this is what his farm looked like few months ago. This is it. Yeah, it's gone. Like everyone was like evicted from the area, and they were compensated to move to other place. And this is the gentleman's farm also. Here we can see before and after. Like that's a duration of 6 months, maybe, like when they lived in the neighborhood, and this is after they were like after they moved out from the neighborhood. Here we can see. So that's also the extended living area before and after. And this is his farm before and after. So Dubai lost a lot of its, like, I would say, central fabric due to the economic crisis of the 2008. Then when the city won the Expo 2020 in 2013, 14, then the trend of urbanism, I would say, went back to normal, to claiming vacant lands for development, but not centrally located lands. So to wrap up this presentation, which urban design like in search for the human scale? This work or this presentation does not suggest completely leaving bigness behind or low density suburbs. Its argument instead is like professionals and scholars in the UAE must rethink urbanism, because the exclusive focus on bigness led to an urban design that is rigid and monotonous. Current forms of urbanism and architecture remain where they were 22 years ago. We have seen no new interventions or physical ideals to inform new generations of urbanism. Bigness, with its rapid pace, homogeneous and dispersed form and exclusive nature, continues to dominate. Urban design in the UAE no longer addresses the needs of the people at the eye level or the human scale, but instead it is caught up in an endless, an unending race to construct the tallest and biggest in the record time. Bigness will continue to flourish in the region. Bigness is inevitable. It's an integral part of the region's goals for economic growth. But economic strategies should not dwarf environmental stewardship and social benefits. Designers and planners must acknowledge all three factors equally and come up with context relevant ideas and practical compromises. So at the end, I would argue that urban design practice in the UAE needs a new manifesto that revives the symbiotic relationship between humanity and physical form. So thank you very much for this opportunity to deliver the talk. Thank you very much for inviting me to the event. If you have any question, I would be more than happy to answer that through an email. So please feel free to drop me any question regarding the presentation. And once again, thank you very much. And it was a pleasure to deliver this talk. Thank you.